Hey everyone, it's Kathis. I am brand new to making YouTube videos, but I've been playing Destiny since the alpha of Destiny 1, so I've put thousands of hours into the Destiny franchise. I love it so much, so I am way late to making YouTube videos, but we're here today. That's all that matters, so let's get right into it. We're going to be covering the Arc subclass today, and more specifically, something that I hadn't really seen too much on YouTube, which is just a basic description of how all the 3.0 subclasses work, down to the aspects and fragments and keywords. I know that might sound really obvious to a lot of players, but my brother-in-law just started playing this game a month and a half ago, and he had no clue how any of this stuff worked. So if you're a new or returning player and are way intimidated by all the crazy systems and stuff that's going on, hopefully this video can help you. Even if I can just help one person, that's all that matters. So we're going to be going to the basics today in Arc. You might learn something if you're a returning player too. I also do want to cover every subclass, so we're just going to be starting with Arc, but look out for those other videos in the future. If that sounds like something that would interest you, then feel free to subscribe down below. My style is as straight to the point as possible. I know my King's Fall video is like 28 minutes, but I tried to make sure that that was as in detail and concise as possible. So if you're interested in that kind of content, make sure to subscribe, but let's get right into it. Arc is all about speed and power, constant chain lightning, speed boosting, blinding, punching, and heavy damage output. It is, in my opinion, the most fun subclass to use, and you will feel totally awesome when you master it. Starting off, in the subclass screen, we have 4 customizable areas. The diamond area to the top left contains the super abilities. The ability section contains our class ability, jump, melee, and grenade. Grenades, by the way, are now universal, meaning that any class can equip any grenade, which is pretty cool. The aspects area allows us to choose how we alter our class's abilities and playstyle on a broader scale. Something that people often miss is that aspects also grant us a certain amount of fragment slots, so it's something to keep in mind. Certain aspect combos might only let us use 3 fragments, while others let us use 4. Fragments let us fine-tune everything just to get it right on more of a micro level. Fragments are also universal, like grenades, so all classes share every fragment. So that's a broad look at the subclass screen. Let's go one level deeper. Destiny has introduced keywords to subclasses to make their effects more universal and understandable. With Arc, we have 4 keywords: Amplify, Blind, Jolt, and these objects called Ionic Traces. So let's break those down and learn the basics of what they do. We'll start with Amplify. Amplify is Arc's self-buff effect, which grants increased general movement speed, better weapon handling, and a huge speed boost after sprinting just for a few seconds, and it lasts as long as we keep sprinting. This is just the base effect of Amplify, and we can make it even better by utilizing certain aspects and fragments, but don't worry, we'll get to that in a minute. The next keyword is Blind, which obviously is pretty self-explanatory. It blinds enemies. This is incredibly useful in activities like Grandmaster Nightfalls or other high-end content, as being able to completely subdue enemies for a few seconds to safely get to cover is often the difference between surviving or dying. Enemies will have a red debuff icon over their head and will be unable to fire their weapons or attack while blinded. The third keyword is Jolt, my personal favorite. Jolt is a chain lightning ability that we've always wanted with Arc. By default, simply damaging a jolted enemy will chain lightning to other enemies within a pretty sizable radius. Lastly, we've got Ionic Traces, which are bolts of Arc energy that will travel to you and refill your ability energy, very similar to Elemental Wells. So that is a very brief overview of the keywords. Now let's dive a little bit deeper and see exactly how they work. So we'll start with Amplify again. Oftentimes, you can become amplified without even realizing what you're doing because it's so easy to become amplified. One way is to just get a few kills within a few seconds of each other with any form of arc damage, so think supers, grenades, melees, weapons, it all counts. That will for sure be the primary way we become amplified, but just so you know, Spark of Volt will make you amplified by just finishing an enemy. Spark of Amplitude will create an orb of power from just getting rapid kills while amplified, so easy way to get your super back, not the greatest fragment, but still a good option to have. Being amplified is a core component to the Arc subclass, and every class will want to have as much amplification uptime as possible because of how much stronger it makes us. Next up, let's talk blinding. Every class will have access to the flashbang grenade because, again, every class has access to every grenade. Flashbangs not only blind targets, but damage them too. The blind effect lasts for a long time on the flashbang grenade, making getting to safety easy without enemies being able to shoot at you. And as I mentioned a second ago, the Spark of Beacons fragment will cause Arc's special weapon final blows to create a blinding explosion while we're amplified. Spark of Brilliance is kind of similar, but requires us to first blind a target, then get a precision kill to create a blinding explosion. So theoretically, you could blind a target, precision kill it to create a blinding explosion, blinding more enemies, then precision kill one of those targets. You see where I'm going. Spark of Beacons is the clear winner here in my opinion. It's just easier to activate, but you can use both if you want to go all in on blinding. Jolting is fun. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing lightning chain and clear an entire room full of enemies, and we can take its effects even further with the right setups. First, here's how we jolt enemies. Spark of Shock is one of the most popular fragments because it allows for all grenades to jolt enemies. With how often we're using grenades now, it for sure makes sense to have this in just about every setup. The new Volt Shot weapon trait pretty much has built-in jolt, simply requiring one kill, a reload, and then instant jolt on the next shot. It's my favorite trait right now by far. So how can we enhance the jolt effect? Spark of Ions is an awesome fragment that creates an ionic trace after getting a jolted enemy kill. This means it's as easy as getting a grenade or Volt Shot weapon kill, then an ionic trace will spawn and go right to you. And speaking of ionic traces, not too much to say about them, but they are awesome. Getting ionic traces to generate regularly will keep your abilities topped up, and with arc abilities being some of the strongest in the game, that's a good thing. Ionic traces can be used alongside elemental wells, which is just insane. If you can set up a killer build with both ionic traces and elemental wells, you will always have ability energy. As mentioned, Spark of Ions is incredibly useful in that you'll be killing jolted targets constantly with arc, which means tons of ionic traces. There is a small cooldown to prevent unlimited ionic trace spam, just as an FYI. Spark of Discharge is an alternative fragment that you can use instead to rely on arc final weapon blows to generate ionic traces. My preference though is definitely Spark of Ions because I just love using grenades. But as always, just go with whatever you prefer here. Now that we understand all the synergies the keywords can have with arc, let's run over the remaining universal things that we can do with arc, and then we'll dive into the class specific stuff. I've mentioned a couple times in this video that all grenades are available on all subclasses, so let's go over them real quick. If you're missing any grenades, by the way, make sure to buy them from Ikora, along with any other fragments. Starting off, lightning grenades detonate 4 lightning bolts over a few seconds. Pulse grenades also detonate multiple times, but in an AoE blast instead of a straight bolt. Storm grenades are a literal storm that cover a pretty nice area and damage enemies inside, my personal favorite. Flashbang grenades blind enemies for around 10 seconds, again making them a great option for high-end content. Flux grenades are mini seeker grenades that track enemies after bouncing off the ground. And lastly, arc bolt grenades are the most underwhelming in my opinion and basically just do a small blast of lightning with minimal chaining. Alright, next up, before we move on to the class-specific stuff, let's cover all the fragments in action. I know we went over a few of them already, but let's just view them all and see them in action from a fragment-only perspective. Spark of Beacons is the one that allows us to create a blinding explosion with special weapon kills while amplified. Spark of Resistance makes us more tanky and gives us more strength. This one is really tough to demonstrate, but just know it works really well. Spark of Momentum helps us reload by sliding over ammo bricks, along with giving us some melee energy. More of a PvP one in my opinion for sure. Spark of Shock should be in every build and makes all grenades jolt enemies. Spark of Discharge can occasionally create ionic traces from arc weapon kills. Spark of Ions is also a must-have with how it creates an ionic trace from all jolt kills. Spark of Frequency increases reload speed with melee kills. Spark of Focus regenerates class ability after sprinting. It's worth noting that the buff you get from this is called Focused Breathing, and in my testing, it's not super noticeable, so I'm personally staying away from this one. Spark of Recharge gives us the Combat Meditation buff, which increases our ability regeneration as long as we are in critical health. Spark of Magnitude increases the duration of all lingering grenades. The left video does not have Spark of Magnitude, the right one does, and you'll notice it gets a couple more pulses out of the Pulse Grenade. Spark of Amplitude creates an orb of power from rapid kills while amplified. Spark of Feedback is a brawler fragment, increasing our melee damage output as we take melee damage. Spark of Volts makes us amplified after a finisher and gives us more recovery. And lastly, Spark of Brilliance is the one that creates a blinding explosion from precision killing blinded targets. Whew, okay, that is all of the fragments listed off and seen in action. There is a place for each of these fragments within different builds, and yes, some are better than others, but without the right synergy and ownership of what you're running, even the best fragments can be useless. So again, I urge you to not just blindly copy other people's builds and expect that you'll just instantly become a god at the game. It takes practice and testing with each fragment, aspect, grenade to see which is best for you. And just a disclaimer, by the way, nothing against using what other people use, just make sure you know how it all synergizes first before blindly diving in. Okay, we are finally to the class-specific side of Arc. So as a reminder, everything before this part of the video has been available to all classes. Let's start with Titan. Aspects first, and we've got 3 to choose from. Knockout grants Amplify by simply getting melee kills, granting 2 fragment slots. With how much we'll be punching stuff on top of all the other ways to get amplified, we will be amplified constantly. We also have the option of being unstoppable objects by using the Juggernaut aspect, which gives 1 fragment slot. While sprinting, we gain a shield in front of us, and if we're amplified while the shield is up, we take significantly less damage. Touch of Thunder is the final aspect, which grants 2 slots, and it's the one that I just can't stop using. 4 of our grenades get enhanced functionality. My favorite is the Storm Grenade, which turns the storm into a traveling thunderstorm that will seek out enemies, and it lasts a long time. I love it. Melee's next. Seismic Strike is a quick forward charge that blinds enemies, and if we're amplified, it will increase the blind effect radius. Ballistic Slam is a nice crash landing ability, but honestly, Thunderclap is just the best. I mean, come on. The damage is massive and it has great range. What more can you say? For the Titan Supers, we've got 2, Thunder Crash and Fists of Havoc. Thunder Crash almost never gets unequipped for me because of the great amount of damage it can do with Curious of the Falling Star, but Fists of Havoc can be okay in PvP as well if you can stay alive during it. Hunters, you're up next. Starting with aspects. Tempest Strike gives 2 fragment slots and adds an alternate, stronger charged melee that you can activate while sliding. It will jolt any target you hit, which is pretty awesome. Lethal Current also gives 2 fragment slots and has a lot going on. After dodging, it increases melee lunge range and gives it Jolt, and automatically blinds any jolted enemy you melee. So basically, just melee everything. Flow State gives 2 fragments and is basically the Hunter class's easy Amplify aspect. All you have to do is defeat a jolted target. It also buffs Amplify a bit too, which is cool. For Hunter melees, you'll have 2 to choose from. Combination Blow allows successive melee hits to increase in damage and regenerate some health and ability energy. I love it. Disorienting Blow is an incredibly easy way to become amplified by just requiring a charged hit on literally any enemy. It will blind the enemy too and amplify you. It's that easy. You'll have 2 supers here, Arc Staff and the new Gathering Storm super. Arc Staff is great for PvP and reflecting projectiles, but I typically stick with Gathering Storm for the great burst damage it offers, being one of the highest damage supers in the game right now. We'll finish up with Warlocks, starting again with the aspects. First, we've got Arc Souls, a fan favorite that gives us 2 fragment slots. Just cast your Rift to generate an Arc Soul, which will basically be a mini turret for you. Allies that pass through your Rift will also get an Arc Soul buddy that they can take with them. Being amplified will supercharge the Arc Soul though, so it's always best to be amplified when possible. Electrostatic Mind is the Warlock's quote-unquote easy amplify aspect and also gives 2 fragment slots. Killing any targets with Arc abilities generates an Ionic Trace, and collecting Ionic Traces will amplify you. And yes, Arc Souls create Ionic Traces. It is crazy, especially with that new exotic helmet. Lightning Surge is the last aspect, granting 2 fragment slots and is another slide plus charged melee ability. Activating your melee while sliding will blink you forward and will call down lightning strikes, which jolt targets. You'll have 2 melees to choose from, Chain Lightning and Ball Lightning. Chain Lightning is an extended range, direct contact hit that jolts targets. Amplify increases this effect too. Ball Lightning, my personal choice, is a projectile-based melee that will fire an arc bolt that can do work. Again, if casted while amplified, it will generate more lightning strikes. Finally, the Warlocks also get 2 supers. Chaos Reach is the one that I prefer since it's a quicker burst damage super. It's okay for damage, but nothing great. Storm Trance just doesn't cut it. It's just not a great super unless you're in pretty low level content. Honestly, the Warlock supers are probably the worst out of the 3. Well, that's the Arc 3.0 guide. It was a lot more challenging than I thought to organize all the aspects, fragments, keywords, everything into something that made sense for all classes. Hopefully now that you've seen all parts of Arc in action, you can decide what's best for you, or hopefully feel a little bit better about that crazy new build you've seen. Honestly, Plunder the Booty has some of the best builds I've ever seen. He's so creative and I often emulate what he's doing with my builds, so check him out if you haven't already. This video took tons of testing and time, so I'd really appreciate a like if you enjoyed it or learned something, and make sure to subscribe so you can stay tuned for more content like this. Well, that's it for now everyone, and I will see you in the next video.